I've been to the occupied Palestinian territories and reported from there for years. I've spent a lot of time filming stories and documentaries about life under Israeli military occupation in the places that are supposed to make up a future Palestinian state. Palestinians are a people. There's a Palestinian flag. Palestine is represented at the United Nations. But for now, there's no actual Palestinian state. And I think the chance of there being one as part of a two-state solution that divides this land between Israelis and Palestinians, well, I don't think that's very likely. And I'm going to tell you why. This is where many people expect this state to eventually exist. More than 5.5 million Palestinians live in these territories, many of them refugees expelled from their homes by Israel. Remember that because it's an important part of the story and we'll get to it later. But for now, I want you to pay attention to these. You know, one thing that stands out to me every time I travel between Palestinian towns in the West Bank is how many Israeli settlements there are. They're everywhere. You can see these white stone-walled buildings and red-tiled roofs all over the occupied West Bank. And under international law, they are all illegal because this is not Israeli land. But the people who live in these areas are Israeli settlers. In fact, about 1 in every 10 Israeli Jews lives in one of these settlements. They include high-ranking government officials, military commanders, and Israeli Supreme Court justices. The Israeli government subsidizes their lifestyle with cheaper housing and tax breaks. These settlements are built on land confiscated by force from Palestinians. Stolen is another word for it. And the settlements are built between Palestinian towns and villages, cutting people off from each other and from their own natural resources. The infrastructure of these Israeli settlements, security zones, settler roads, and military bases have made it impossible to create a contiguous Palestinian state here. In fact, Israel has said that it wants to annex those settlements and keep them for itself. The settlements are the most obvious reasons why Palestinian statehood in the West Bank remains highly unlikely. It's a reason you can see and feel. It's a reason that's literally made of concrete. But there are also a lot of political reasons. Longest-serving Prime Minister, the conservative right-wing Benjamin Netanyahu, has said that the most he'd allow Palestinians to have is a state minus. And as we were recording this, the Israeli parliament voted to reject the creation of a Palestinian state. So the rejection of a fully independent Palestinian state is mainstream in Israeli politics. In contrast, even Hamas, the other major Palestinian movement, has said that if a real Palestinian state were to be founded in the West Bank and Gaza, it would accept that. Obviously, the Oslo Accords did not lead to an independent Palestinian state, and there haven't been serious negotiations for a resolution since early 2001. But one thing every Israeli government has done, even when there were negotiations, was to build more settlements. Here's Israeli historian Avi Shleim describing that strategy.
He's like a man who pretends to negotiate over the division of a pizza and he keeps eating it.
Okay. Yeah.
I promise that was the last food analogy in this video, but this whole idea of cutting up the land and dividing it is not new. It's actually a pretty old one. So old that there's an argument that partition, trying to create two states on this land, is the cause of this conflict. To become a Jewish state, Israel forced out most of the non-Jews. Letting them back in, which Israel is obligated to do under UN Resolution 194 adopted in 1948, would make Jews a minority again. You know, the refugee issue isn't a minor problem. For Palestinians, the right to return is at the center of their struggle and identity. But even if we were to ignore that and just focus on creating a Palestinian state on the ground, we have to deal with the fact that neither Israel nor its main backer, the United States, really accept the idea of Palestinians having full sovereignty. They insist that a Palestinian state can't have its own military, for example. It's hard to imagine Palestinians accepting that, especially considering what happened during the Nakba or Israel's current destruction of Gaza.